Tonight we're taking a look at running virtual club meetings for those clubs that have pivoted to holding online meetings during the pandemic. Today is Tuesday, October 20th, 2020, and we are still in the grips of the nationwide or slash global COVID-19 pandemic. And so many investment clubs that used to meet regularly each month have moved to an online format. Many are considering if they can supplement or augment their regular meeting schedules with additional online meetings. And so we thought we'd cover some of the best practices and some suggestions and tips for running a successful meeting using various online meeting tools. Now tonight joining me is Russell Malley, who is our club accounting advisor, as well as Sean Poolrang, who's our senior technical support representative for the iClubcentral product lines. They're in the back office and will be helping to answer questions as we go. And as always, we'll have plenty of opportunity for you to ask your own questions using that questions box. Feel free to type them in as we progress through the webinar. Now, as more and more clubs are moving to the online meeting format, there are all sorts of tools and methods that you can use to facilitate your investment club's online meetings. Products like Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx allow a full-featured online meeting experience with screen sharing and video of attendees. There are other tools like Google Hangouts, Skype, and free conference call that can allow some aspect of online screen sharing and collaboration, as well as audio meetings. So at all sorts of different levels, there are tools and ways that clubs can be meeting. And these tools, many of them work with smartphones, with tablets, with laptops, with computers, using all different operating systems, no matter whether you're using Windows or you're using Mac or even Linux. You can access various online meeting tools. We're not going to talk tonight about the various tools themselves. We're going to talk about best practices and principles that will apply no matter what tools you are using. But there are a lot of options out there that you can take a look at. The advantages of online meetings, of course, during the pandemic is that it reduces contact with other people in close surroundings. So even if your state or local jurisdiction allows groups of 10 or fewer to meet, or whatever the number may be, you may still choose to postpone or suspend your in-person meetings during this time. But there are other benefits, as many people who are now working from home have learned, that the online and remote workforce eliminates your commuting time, and that's the same to be said for traveling to your club meetings. This is might be saving you another hour a day during your club meeting days if you don't have to drive to and from a particular meeting. But online meetings have also become popular for the ability to allow members who move out of your town. They can still participate in the club if the club embraces online meeting tools, or other non-local members. Certainly there have been family investment clubs for many, many years who have maintained their clubs using online meeting tools, no matter where their family members are across the country or even around the world. So that can be an advantage as well once you understand and are utilizing these tools. Screen sharing works especially well for sharing financial reports, minutes, but also portfolio reports and stock studies. Perhaps in your club, in your in-person meetings, you had the ability to display on a large screen a stock study and modify it in real time, or go to a website, look up particular research. But that is especially facilitated in an online meeting atmosphere where every member has access to the computer, where if you decide that you like a company but you want to adjust the stock study parameters. You want to apply some separate judgment. You want to see if a different growth rate or a lower growth rate might still provide acceptable results. It's very easy to go on to the web during the meeting. Everyone can see the results and everyone can contribute. If you weren't using any sort of display during your club meetings, I remember, back before that was really possible, a club meeting, we might like a stock, but then we would have to kind of manually update our stock studies and try to do quick back of the envelope calculations to figure out if the stock was indeed a buy, or perhaps the club felt the judgment was too aggressive for that particular company. So that is something that can be handled very easily in an online meeting environment. And so I think that adds to the productivity that you can gain by taking advantage of online meeting tools. Now, if necessary, you should, before you embark on a full switch over to online meetings, make sure that your partnership agreement or bylaws support this. Chances are your bylaws and partnership agreement, other operating documents, are broad enough that maybe you don't need to expressly permit online meetings. But if the language in your documents can be so construed that online meetings are not permissible, then you would need to make an adjustment to those. Now, to change your bylaws, that's a matter of majority vote. For most changes to your bylaws, your partnership agreement would have to be completely rewritten and signed by all members if you're making amendments to that. For most clubs, probably a well-documented agreement amongst yourself to update the bylaws is probably fine. But again, do address that expressly and don't assume that your bylaws or that your operating documents allow it. I understand that this is somewhat problematic if the club is unable to meet in person. How do you modify the partnership agreement or bylaws except through an online meeting? So there's a little bit of a fudge factor here that you'll need to address. I know that some organizations that I've been a part of have allowed, for instance, meetings to be held via conference call, but that's not the same thing as a virtual meeting experience. And so that was part of the organization updating its operating documents would expressly permit the types of meetings and formats that are allowable in order for it to conduct business. So just point that out. I mean, everyone's partnership agreements and bylaws are going to be different. So make sure that you take a good look at it, make sure that it's not forbidden, and perhaps go the next step and expressly allow online meetings to take the place of in-person ones. Now, you will also need to address the issue of voting in online meetings, and you should determine that in advance, or maybe during your first meeting, agree how voting is going to be tabulated. For a small club, it's certainly easy enough to conduct a verbal vote where you can hear the yays and the nays. But for larger clubs, it may not be able to determine a majority just if everyone's jumping on the voice component all of a sudden placing their vote. So you might need to do a roll call style vote where the secretary would name each member, go down the list and record their vote, and then tally up the results. For those clubs that do secret voting, this is an issue that came up. And I'm not sure how a secret ballot could be carried out in an online environment. So that might be something that's not possible. Another possibility is on the myICLUB.com website, there is a voting tool that you can enter ballots in and have the members vote. It's not expressly created to tabulate results in real time, although it would work, but it would require each member during the meeting, during the vote, to go to the myICLUB website, to click on the voting page and to cast their ballot, at that time. But so that might be an option, but again, then the results are often disclosed to at least the officer administrator of the club. If you do have any suggestions in that area, if that's something that your club has faced, reach out and let us know what solutions you've found. But otherwise, again, it should be fairly easy to determine the best way to make sure that your votes are fair and that everyone has the opportunity to chip in during the online meeting with their particular votes. Again, if you're doing different types of vote, if you're doing weighted voting, voting weighted by capital account, you would have to do a roll call style vote anyway so that you could determine the final tally. If it's a majority vote, or if it's just one or two people who are abstaining or voting against it, that makes it pretty clear as well what the result of the voting is. But do consider this, take this into account as you're making your plans. Now, there are essentially 4 different types of online meeting tools that you could utilize to hold your club meeting. The conference call that's used telephonically. This is just audio where everyone dials in to a common conference call number. It's easy to set up. Everyone's got a phone. Everyone can reach this. You have to hold the phone to your ear, put it on speakerphone if you have a smartphone, a mobile phone. Not optimal for sharing reports, stock studies, approving minutes, for instance. You can't see the information. It would have to be distributed in advance. Again, a conference call style meeting works fine for emergency action in between a club meeting if that was the case, that if your club did allow, for instance, during the president to call a vote on a stock that has perhaps had a recent announcement of bad news and the fundamentals are now appearing more negatively. The club might convene a conference call meeting, but that's pretty straightforward. It's one motion, short discussion, and a vote. So for an entire club meeting, that becomes a little more problematic. There are also tools that you can conduct a meeting where people can come together and chat only, where you're typing messages into a chat box using a service such as Discord, where you set up a Discord server that each member could log into, and then type their messages and responses. Again, kind of clunky for when you've got 15 or 20 people who are all having conversations, and maybe not everyone is as skilled a typist, so it might not be the best way to conduct a meeting. Much more popular is something in the style of our GoToWebinar, the audio and screen sharing, where you hear me, you see my screen. I don't have my webcam on, so you're not seeing my face. A little more complicated, requires some more specific tools to organize this type of meeting, but it's ideal for sharing reports, stock studies, conducting real-time research. I can quickly jump to a website. I could open up Toolkit or SSG Plus and show you my stock studies. I can go to the portfolio report. I can load up myICLUB and display the valuation statement. We can share the minutes of the last meeting so you can see the text on the screen, and I can make changes in real time if there are corrections to the minutes. So this is the sort of probably for many clubs, this is a great solution and something to aspire to. And then finally, it's the Zoom interface, where you see video of the participants, the audio and screen sharing capabilities. And the addition of video of the attendees can be beneficial. I mean, this adds a little fun. It increases the interpersonal nature of the meeting. It's not anonymous. You get to see the other members. You can have some fun with it, and certainly it feels a lot less like a meeting that's just being held via the computer, where you get a little bit of a sense of the other members of your club and what they're doing, and bring some life into the meeting. This does require, of course, that you've got a webcam equipped a computer or smartphone or tablet or other device that's got a camera capability. Again, not uncommon for laptops. Desktop computers may require a separate webcam, but those webcams have become very affordable, so this is not necessarily a high ticket item. The people of every age have been using webcams to communicate, whether you're doing Zoom or Skype or other things, grandparents communicating with the grandkids and their kids across the country using a video camera, video or a webcam. That's been very popular, as well as people at work. More and more meetings are being held with a video component. And again, just to bring some life into and some personal interaction into it. So those are the different types of tools that are available and the advantages of them. Again, if you're to get started, perhaps not worrying so much about the video component or necessarily mandating it might be a good thing to do. Many of your members might not be able to handle all of that technology all at once, but you can ease into it for sure. We brought up the, actually not 3 types, but 4 types. I've kind of categorized the 4 types of online meeting participants because each of the roles are a little different, and each of these individuals and categories have something different responsibilities and different. There's some different tips and guidance for preparing for them. The organizer is the person who sets up the meeting, who distributes the sign-on information. Here's the login, here's the link, here's the time. The organizer doesn't establish the time of the meeting, that's done by the club, but would set it up in whatever service that you're using, starts the meeting. The organizer has to go on and start the meeting so other members can join, and then ends the meeting at the end, in which case everyone's disconnected. There can be more than one organizer, and that's actually often a good practice to have a second organizer, not only as a backup, but for many services like with GoToMeeting, if the organizer gets disconnected, after a certain time, the meeting is ended. So having a second organizer will make sure that if one organizer gets disconnected, another organizer is available. Now I refer to the chair is the president or the other officer who's running the business portion of the meeting. This may or may not be the organizer. And I would argue that it makes a lot of sense to not make the chair and the organizer be the same person, but to have some support and some backup. If the organizer is providing perhaps some of the technical support during the meeting to other members, the chair gets to direct the meeting, gets to set the agenda, show the agenda, step through it, lead the discussion, not have to worry about the technical side so much. So that's why I break those out. The presenter is any member who presents information during the meeting, and you would have multiple presenters during a meeting, and they can go by different terms in different applications. For instance, in GoToMeeting, the presenter is a panelist, and that's who you can share your screen with, who can share screens with the attendees. But the secretary might be a presenter, would present the minutes and be able to show the minutes on the screen. The president would show the agenda, walk through the discussions, lead the ballots. The treasurer would show financial statements. If someone was presenting a stock, they would show their stock study, notes about their research, whatever format that you're utilizing. The portfolio manager might show the portfolio reports. Here's the current status. The stock watchers, again, would be able to present their results on the screen. If they had any news that they wanted to show, they might otherwise just talk through it. And then finally, you have the attendees. These are the members or the guests, those who are participating in the meeting. and who will be voting, who may be contributing to discussions, but may not be presenting. Any presenter is an attendee, the chair is an attendee, the organizer is an attendee, but not all attendees have to have an additional role. So that's just a few definitions as we talk through the organization of the meeting and how to set it up, and where we go from here. So let's see, a couple of questions here. Barbara asked if there's a way to do a combination meeting where some people are in a physical location and others Zoom in, and that is possible, and many clubs do it. It helps if you've got a large screen that you can project the meeting slides on, what has happening in the physical meeting, so everyone in the physical location, in the virtual meeting, so everyone who's in the physical meeting can see the virtual slides, no matter who's talking. The microphone, audio setup can be a little trickier when you've got a group of people. If you've got a speakerphone, that will often work. Today, again, you can get a Bluetooth phone speaker that will connect to a smartphone or to a computer that will broadcast a little more loudly, so that you've got a group of 6 or 8 people around a table and then another 5 or 6 people online. The people in the room are able to speak up and to hear outside of the room. It takes a little bit more thoughtfulness about the people in the room. If they're talking softly, the microphone won't pick up their conversation. So they have to keep in mind that they're speaking not only to the people in the room, but the people on the call. So it is definitely possible to do. And if you don't have a projector, again, look into, if you're meeting in someone's home and you've got access to a widescreen TV, many of those you can cast to the TV, or you can plug in a computer to the TV, and that can be a great option for people to see. If you need to, you can huddle around a smaller screen, a computer or a monitor, a laptop or a monitor. But again, bigger is often better in that situation. Linda asks if polling would work for voting. If you're using the GoToMeeting application where it has polls built in, yeah, I think that would be a great option, and that would also that's a great option for secret ballots, because you wouldn't necessarily. You would see at the end, the administrator would be able to see who voted which way if they expressly looked for it, but that would be something. And Steve points out that chats can be used for voting as well. And again, that works for small clubs. If you've got 25 people all voting, the way that chat usually goes during an online meeting is that it's non-sequential, and some people don't vote early, other people vote late, somebody's got a question, and so it can be a little harder for the secretary to tabulate votes in that situation, but it certainly is possible. All right, so let's talk about meeting preparation tips, getting ready for the meeting by meeting role. So for organizers, there's a tool that I wanted to point out called Doodle Polls. It's an option to schedule meeting times where you can set, if you want to know when everyone's available, you can send out a doodle poll. Everyone selects the times that they're available, and then you can come back and you've got one meeting time that works for as many people as possible. Doodle does have a subscription service, but they do have a free poll option that's not always easily found from their homepage. But if you go to doodle.com/free-poll, that link will get you to their free poll option. Otherwise, search around on their website. You don't need to sign up or subscribe to it. But that's great if you're scheduling a meeting. And the organizer, before the meeting, I would advise you to create a getting started document for your members with step-by-step instructions for installing the software. Where do they go to download it? What do they need to install? What accounts do they need to create? How will they join the meeting? What are they going to need in terms of audio, video? What are they going to need in terms of computers, guidelines for participating, some reminders of some of the best practices that we'll talk about as well. So the Again, it's not just enough to set up the meeting. You need to support your club members and get them into this new environment. A lot of this information can be found on the company's website, the service provider's website that you're using. Some of it might be pretty self-explanatory, but again, my experience is that people want to have a document that helps them and gives them every step of the way what they need to do. They can check it off, what they need to remember to do during the meeting, how did they get to the meeting. So more help is definitely better than less. For the chair, remember that online meetings can quickly run off the rails if they're not well organized and well run. So you need to be prepared in advance. Look for agenda items in advance, as you should be doing already. Ask members what they're doing. Make sure that the stock committee knows that they're presenting stocks, who they are, and what they're presenting, and then create and share that agenda in advance of the meeting. That will just help things go much more smoothly so that you don't get to the new business section and all of a sudden you've got 3 or 4 new items to discuss, especially when you're in this kind of time-constrained environment. You don't want your meetings to go on and on and on in the online format, because it does take concentration to remain committed. For a lot of people, it can be a little more difficult than in an online meeting area. You might have trouble hearing, there might be glitches, there might be audio dropouts. You're spending a lot of time staring at a computer screen already during the day. So to contribute to that even more during your club meeting can be problematic. So we really want to keep things as streamlined as possible. Make sure during the agenda, when creating the agenda, that and creating your plan for running the meeting, that you create specific times for questions and discussions. And it can be useful to have that in the agenda, so that when you've got a ballot motion, don't just say put the motion in or what the idea is, but discussion. And because you don't want people jumping in with comments before the discussion period is open. It just makes the meetings a free-for-all. If people wait until you open it up for discussion expressly, then you can have a little bit more better managed club meeting time. So club meeting. So keep that in mind as well, that your people want, when they've got an idea, they want to say it right away. And especially in the online environment, that can cause confusion. You don't know who's talking necessarily. And if things start to get off track, they will go down that rabbit hole very quickly. So you want to keep things aligned and working well. For presenters, make sure that all the information that you have to display on the screen is large enough to be read and oriented properly. Remember, when you're looking at your computer screen, it's wide, but paper documents are tall. An 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper is tall, but not wide. So when you display it on a computer monitor at full resolution, you're only looking at perhaps half of the computer screen is taken up by the memo. So you might want to experiment with, and this is the problem with the stock selection guide. If I fire up Toolkit and we look at the first page, we can't even see the whole thing because the monitor and the orientation of paper are at odds with each other. So think about that. If you're printing documents, if you can print them in landscape mode, that can be useful, or creating PDFs, for instance. Creating them in landscape mode can be useful, and even your creation of agendas and minutes and other and stock studies. You can also do 2 columns if you can do that. Landscape, but divide it into 2 columns so the text is not so wide to be read. Make sure that text is large, again, because the window that people may be viewing it might be not their whole computer screen. In many cases, people just don't figure out that they can make that window bigger. So you want to make sure that everything can be viewed, and think about it as you're presenting it on the screen. For attendees, make sure that you check in the the instructions from the meeting organizer in advance, make sure that everything's installed, create the account if needed, and test it in advance. If this is your first club meeting, don't install the software and then click on the link during the club meeting and expect everything to go well. So test your speaker, test your microphone, test your headset, test your webcam, test it all in advance. And if you don't have a computer headset and you're doing a lot of online meetings, I suggest you look for one. They're not expensive. A little boom mic and at least one earphone that sits on your head. It's lightweight, it's comfortable, and it provides much better audio experience than perhaps the microphone, built-in microphone and or speakers that you have. And often those built-in microphones on your computer or laptop pick up a whole lot of background noise and it make it hard for other people to hear because you're just hearing the background noise in your particular room or your particular setting. And so headsets are much better at canceling out a lot of that ambient noise, making a better listening experience for everyone. So be sure to test your equipment and try it out in advance. We're going to talk about running a practice session, which will give everyone the chance for how to utilize this tool. Certainly before you go into your first online club meeting, have a practice session or 2 practice sessions. Give the members an opportunity. If you're the organizer, you're setting this up, you're converting it over, you want people to feel comfortable with it. Yes, after your first or second or third time, you still might not be entirely comfortable, but a couple more months down the road and it'll be easy. Click in that meeting and know where all the buttons are and what you need to click. But the first couple of times, it can be very, very frustrating. And even if you use one meeting platform, we've been using at iClub we've been using GoToWebinar since 2006. So yes, doing monthly webinars plus additional webinars, I've become very familiar with the interface. But then we also at the office use Microsoft Teams, and we also at some events they're using Zoom. And so every time I have to give an event using a different platform, I make sure to practice that platform because I'm not as comfortable with those as I am with GoToMeeting. So everyone can use, if they're not using that explicit platform, can use the practice session. So schedule a practice session. This is a practice meeting. We're not going to do any club business, but we're going to try out all your equipment. We're going to debug any problems that people have. We're going to allow everyone to get comfortable with the tools and the functions, the audio and the video settings, how to share a screen, make sure that everyone understands how they can present something and go through and allow them to present the screen, how to highlight or make notes on the screen, how to transfer screen control to another member when you're done. And importantly, perhaps one of the most important tasks that an attendee can learn is how to mute and unmute themselves during the event, during the meeting. And again, our best practice is that when you're not talking, you mute your microphone. So that improves the audio quality for everyone. I've been in so many meetings, online meetings, where one person's got a bad connection or a bad microphone or lots of background noise, and it blocks and interrupts the meeting, and you can't attendees can't hear anyone else speaking because of it. And if the organizer is on the ball, they can mute that person, which means that they can't talk unless they specifically request to be unmuted. So if everyone learns how to mute and unmute themselves, that can go a long way. And in fact, I put a little post-it note on my monitor that says mute, unmute, and slip it on the side there to remind myself to unmute myself during particular meetings where I might not be presenting, just attending.
Doug?
Hey, Russell. Yes, Russell.
I would add, if you have video capabilities, know what's appearing in your background of
Yeah.
your webcam.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later too. So, but that's a great, great example as well. Be mindful of what's going on. The chat function is also useful, and that's something that you can take a look at. Michelle says, talking about the chat tonight. For instance, in GoToWebinar, every event has a chat transcripts and questions transcripts, so everything gets saved, and the organizer can can view that information. But that is certainly something that can be useful uh, for your club meeting to capture the chat transcripts. It can help the secretary in developing the minutes, for instance. So that can be useful. Also, so as Russell was pointing out, for video participants, it can be great. If you've ever been on a conference call, someone will ask a question, then there will be a pause, and then two people will start to talk at once, and then they'll both stop, and then they'll start to talk again, and each one is waiting for the other one to continue, and when they don't, that person will, right? And so that overlapping conversation can be a little difficult when you can't see the person, and that's one advantage of having video is those nonverbal cues allow for better communication. Besides being more personal, it really makes things a lot easier. When you can't hear someone, you don't know if they're about to say something, but when people are beginning to speak, you can see them open their mouth, and it can facilitate a smoother meeting. One tip, a big tip, is that light should be in front of you. So don't be sitting with your back to a window, a bright window where the sun's coming in, because all the camera will pick up is the light behind you, and you'll appear in shadow. So have light in front of you. If you've got a desk lamp, position it slightly in front of you. Don't have a lot of bright light behind you. We don't need to go into all sorts of lighting design elements about the shadows and where the angle of the light is and the color of the light and the temperature of the light, but just you do want to be visible. And in low light situations, most webcams are not going to have a very good resolution. They're going to drop quality. They don't work well in low light situations. As Russell pointed out, don't forget you're on video. If you're not paying attention, if you're doing something other than participating in the club meeting, everyone's going to be able to see it. So keep that in mind, and watch out for background action. It's just if you have the ability to go into a room by yourself and close the door and put a sign on it that says, webinar in progress, do not enter, that can be useful. And it's a guaranteed that if you have a cat, that cat will be on your desk and showing off in front of the webcam during the club meeting. Kind of goes without saying. But pets and children and other people can be distracting, not only for you but for other people. Another tip for webcams is position it so that your face fills most of the screen. Other people are going to see a thumbnail, so they're going to see you 2 inches high. If you position the web camera so far back that you are already tiny on your screen, no one is going to be able to see you. It kind of defeats the purpose. So you might have to kind of figure out, how do I use the webcam zoom control to zoom in a little bit and position it so that your face is visible. And again, that just helps, and that's something that you can practice during your practice session. When you're in the meeting, if you're the organizer, it can be useful to have 2 monitors. you can display the content on one and the meeting tools on another. This is what I do when I present my webinars and do my staff meetings. One screen will be what we're looking at, if it's a web page or a document, and the other screen is where I've got my controls, I've got the questions box, I've got the attendee view, I've got the chat window. That's all on my other monitor. It makes it easy for me to organize, so that can be useful. Watch out, however, bringing a second computer, bringing your laptop into the office and logging onto that one, unless as a way of monitoring the meeting, for instance, because if you've got if the audio is turned on that laptop when you start that second session next to your first computer, you can get a feedback loop that will blow out the eardrums of everyone who is on the meeting already. So you want to just be careful of that. If if you are thinking, oh, I've got a second computer, I can log in. Your login, you might have to create a second login or use a second set of credentials to log in that case. But again, I think more and more people have 2 monitors hooked up to a computer these days. That can be very useful. Be ready if you're the organizer and understand how to mute and unmute attendees. Again, we're going to try to eliminate unnecessary noise that will interfere with everyone else. So when you've got that situation, you want to make sure that you can you know how to mute an attendee, and be ready to provide tech support. Again, let people chat with you if they're having a problem. Let them call you on your cell phone. Let them chat with you, send you a text if they're having significant problems. It's always useful to know if maybe it's something that you can help with. If you're not providing tech support, is there someone else? And again, these roles don't have to be unique to one person. You might have an organizer, and then you've got someone else who is the who will be the tech support. The computer guy is like, yeah, I'll help debug problems as people are experiencing them during the meeting. That can be very useful and reassuring for your members. For the chair, I think it's a good idea to display the screen, the agenda on screen. Again, make sure that it's legible so that you can see it, but then and include those transitions as you step through that agenda. I think that can be very useful. You can use think about using PowerPoint for your agenda instead of a Microsoft Word document. So it looks like this slide on this screen rather than in a Word document. That way it would be formatted properly. Keep the meeting moving along, and but allow enough time for questions. And I think a lot of meeting chairs, you've got to find the right balance between letting a discussion find a natural resolution, and when that's not happening, table the discussion, table the item for the next meeting, send people off on a task to collect more information, do more research, figure out if you can reach a consensus if you have more information. So just some good things to think about for meeting chairs. If you are presenting during the meeting, try to log into any websites before the meeting if you're going to display them. So there's nothing more annoying than having a lot of people watch you try to log into a website, and you're going to be pressed for time, and then you're going to misenter your password, and then you're going to get even more befuddled. And if you're logged in and ready to go, have them open in different tabs on your browser so that you can flip back and forth very quickly. That will just make things go much more efficiently. Know how to switch windows. The Alt-Tab key on a computer, on a PC computer, allows me to switch between different websites, different screens, and so you can see the different options. That's just a very quick way of doing it instead of going to the taskbar and selecting a different tab. Keep, if you are presenting your computer, make sure that you don't have any inadvertent or sensitive information on your computer that other people might see during the meeting. right? So keep that in mind. If you're going to be showing your web browser, maybe clear your browser history. Anything that you don't want other people to see should be wiped from your computer, because if it's not, you can pretty much guarantee that at some point people are going to be able to see particular information. So watch out displaying any sort of sensitive information anytime on your computer when you're showing it to other people in a meeting. Know how to maximize windows to full screen and how to enlarge text in windows. Often you can scroll with your mouse by holding the control key. You can make web pages look bigger. You can maximize windows to full screen. You can get rid of, if you're showing an Excel spreadsheet, you can get rid of the ribbon bar and then really just focus on the cells. You don't need the ribbon bar to be giving a demonstration. So just keep that in mind. Often it might be useful to create a PDF of a document rather than showing it in the native format, such as an Excel file. If you had a PDF of it, you can, display that pretty well on your screen. Whereas if you're going into Excel, you've got to open the file, load it, and but if you wanted to be interactive, of course, that would be the way to do it. Just keep it in mind, think about it before the meeting and make sure that things are visible. For the for all attendees, as I mentioned before, it's better if you can isolate yourself. And again, it might be nice to sit out on your deck, but if it's noisy outside or windy, that can really interrupt the meeting. So try to keep it quiet. As I said, the headphones or headset can really be much more efficient than your computer speakers and microphone. I can't recommend that enough. Even you could have a separate standing microphone on your desk. Some people who present webinars like that. I think that a headset is much more advantageous. And again, I have a wireless headset connected to my computer that I do this webinar and all my webinars with, and I'm very comfortable with that. Don't have to worry about it getting unplugged. It works very well for my purposes. For any meeting, don't show up 2 minutes before the meeting's set to start. Then if you have problems, you're going to be that person who comes in 5 minutes, 10 minutes late saying, sorry, I had problems getting online. Don't be that person. Try to show up a couple minutes in advance, even if you're just turning on the computer, and you can check your email while you're waiting for the meetings to start, but don't rush in. Start the meeting, expect everything to work well, because that's when your computer is going to decide, oh, Windows did an update, it needs to reboot and install, please wait 10 minutes, and it'll take forever. So show up before the meeting, be ready for it. If possible, wired computers are preferred over Wi-Fi connected computers, simply because of the speed and amount of data that can be transmitted on a wired computer. So again, probably again, most of the meeting tools like Zoom and GoToMeeting and WebEx are pretty good at throttling back the data if it senses your computer is having trouble or if your connection is a little slow. But you can do as much as you can to help that by not running other programs and by using a wired computer instead of your smartphone or a tablet. Know how to maximize the meeting window, which should be pretty self-explanatory. And always, 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 if you're not speaking, mute yourself. You learn where that mute button is, how to turn it on and turn it off, and that will really be useful. Steve asks, what about dismissing an annoying visitor, someone who wasn't invited, keeps unmuting and is disruptive? Well, if somebody wasn't invited, they probably don't have access to your meeting. But again, the organizer should have the ability to dismiss anyone from the meeting, and we've certainly that has happened before, where people have been in meetings and their connection is just so poor, or they step away from their computer, they forget that their microphone is on, they're having a conversation off screen, in that situation, you can either dismiss somebody or you can mute them. And again, administrator controls have the ability to mute attendees, and in those cases, those attendees can't unmute themselves, so they would have to request in chat to be unmuted. But again, if you make that as much of a as much as you can to get people to mute themselves and be aware of the noise that's in their particular space, that would help quite a bit.
Doug,
Yes,
I
go
don't know
ahead.
about GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, but for Zoom, if someone sets up the meeting so you have a waiting room, if you dismiss, and you can dismiss someone, if you dismiss them, then they have to go to the waiting room to get back on, and you can just not admit them. So it's sort of a security issue. I happen to have to use Zoom just before I retired from teaching when everything went online. So we were told, please use waiting rooms to help make sure you don't get someone Zoom bombing your class. So that gives you a little more control.
Let's see, another question. Barbara asks how best to take minutes in an online meeting, and that's a great question, and that's something that I was thinking about, and I had some tips in mind that never made it to a slide. Certainly, a tool like many of the tools have a recording function that the administrator or organizer can record a meeting. That helps a little bit, but in order then to create the meeting minutes, that means the secretary, in effect, would have to view the recording of the meeting, listen to it again. Now, you may, depending on the video program that you might be using to rewatch the recorded meeting, you might be able to speed it up and watch at a little bit faster pace, and pause when you need to, and take notes as you go. Again, and I suppose that at some point, clubs might reach the point where they say, well, we'll just archive all of our meetings, and now the minutes are the recording of the online meeting. I think that's, again, I think that's acceptable if that's what you want to do. Probably, I would suspect that some people might object to that, but it is a possibility. Certainly, if you have a chat transcript or questions transcript that could be saved, that might help facilitate it. If you are the secretary, you could also do an audio recording on your own computer, and there are freeware and shareware programs that you could investigate that would allow you to, when the meeting starts, you hit a little program on your computer, it records the audio and then saves it as an MP3 afterwards. And then from that MP3 or WAV file, but more likely an MP3 file, again, you could listen to it, you could jump forward, you could speed it up, and jump to and from, back and forth within that file, and that would help you to create the meeting minutes. So there are some options there as well.
Doug?
Yes,
just
Russell.
My club happens to have 2 attorneys in it, and this issue did come up when we were going online, and so they just wanted to be sure, make sure you get permission from people if you're going to be recording, because a lot of states have restrictions on permissions for recordings. So just be aware of that. You're going to want people to have permission to be having them recorded.
Yep, thank you. That's a good word of advice, and certainly we think again, your club should agree and be aware of what's going on as you're doing it. Steve points out he uses PowerPoint as well, so that's a great tip for conducting your meetings that way. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, Michelle says in our partnership agreement, the wording is the following, quote, periodic meetings shall be held as determined by the partnership, end quote. And to her, that leaves the door open on whether we meet in person versus virtually. And so I think that again, that's vague enough that it could be interpreted as such, and it opens the door for you to clarify. For instance, in your bylaws, if you have separate bylaws, you can simply amend the bylaws, and you're still remaining true to the partnership agreement. Again, our prevailing school of thought is that things should be clear in your operating documents, and so if they're not clear, then you should make efforts to clarify them and to be explicit rather than. And that's not to say that you can't be broad, but just understand that at some point someone will come along and raise an objection, and then you'll have to defend yourself. So if you can't do it, you have to you're going to be forced to come up with some answers. Okay, well, hopefully that's been useful for you. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Sean. The next month in November, our club webinar will be on year-end portfolio management tasks. So getting ready for the year-end. Then in December, we'll look at closing the books. January, preparing investment club taxes. And February is our club tax clinic. So that's our schedule for the next 4 months for our investment club webinar. But we've got a bunch of other webinars in the works on the Better Investing side as part of their Club Treasurer series, and year-end webinar from the or year-end or year beginning webinar from the Small Cap Informer for subscribers. So we are continuing with our online education initiatives through these webinars, as well as the other events that we're participating in. So thank you so much for turning out tonight. Hopefully, again, this is useful for you. Please feel free to share comments and suggestions with me at my email there, gerlach@iclub.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next Investment Club webinar.